over to you, Nadine. We are online, and everyone can turn on their cameras.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Welcome to our discussion of career options in law. I'd like to welcome all of you. I hope everyone has had a good day. And we would like to welcome our speakers. For today, we have Kawsar Zaman with us and Zafar Abbas. Welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'd like to thank Global Institute of Law for hosting this event. Thank you so much. And just a brief introduction to our speakers. We have Zafar Abbas, who is a founding director of Averroes Solicitors in London. He has a master's in commercial law and specializes in international arbitration from the University of Glasgow and the University of Strathclyde. And he's recently done a course in international investment law and arbitration from the University of Cambridge. He specializes in international investment and commercial arbitration, arbitration related to court litigation, public law, and human rights. And he's well versed in international arbitration. He's dealt with high profile cases in public law and human rights cases, and he responds with individuals and the British government. So he's in my books, he's an expert. He's really good at what he does, and he's the perfect person to answer all the questions that we have today. And we also have Kawsar Zaman today. He is a UK qualified barrister and mediator. He specializes in public regulatory and employment law. Before he went to the bar, he was a solicitor at the Magic Circle law firms Clifford Chance and Allen and Overy, and where he specialized in financial services and regulatory law. And he graduated with a first-class law degree from the London School of Economics in 2012. And before he read for the BCL at Oxford as an OCIS scholar. Then he attended Harvard Law School as a Fulbright scholar. That's where he obtained his LLM, his master's in law, and he taught at Queen Mary University, LSE, and is a visiting lecturer at the University of Law. So today we have experts here who can answer our questions and answer any questions that you have. We are in good hands. So I think as we should start the discussion. So just to start, we just wanted to know exactly what made you get into the profession and why did you choose law out of every profession in the world? Why did you pursue this profession? So any one of you can start. We can start with Zafar. Zafar, you're muted.
I'm very sorry for that. Thank you so much,
No
Nadine,
problem.
for the very nice introduction. So addressing your first question, even before I decided to study law and pursue this career, I was very much interested, and still I am interested in comparative religious studies, reasoning, logic, and philosophy. And my passion for philosophy and reasoning and logic, it led me to this profession, and I decided to pursue a career as a lawyer when I did my BA, Bachelor of Art degree in Pakistan in 2000. So every person has different reasons, but my main reason was my passion for legal philosophy, logic, reasoning, and my desire to analyze things. And I thought at that time that this profession is something which will satisfy my desires.
Thank you so much, Zafar. And you, Kawsar?
Thank you very much. And can I start off by thanking you, Nadine, for inviting me along, and Zubair. I'm very pleased to be joining Zafar on this panel to answer your questions. Hopefully we can impart some wisdom for your viewers. In terms of what encouraged me to come into the law, it was really my background. I grew up in a council estate in a fairly deprived part of London. I was the first in my family to go to university, and I think where I was growing up, it's a fairly cheesy story, but there was lots of injustice, police issues around police order, police control. And I was always someone, certainly at school and beyond, who always spoke out when issues were not right. And when looking at what profession suited my abilities, I was never a man of maths or science. I thought it has to be law. And I think lots of Asian viewers will sympathize that your parents give you 3 options if you're Asian. You either become a lawyer, doctor, or an engineer. So the doctor and the engineer disqualified themselves, and so I was left with law. So I pursued law as a result, and I've never really looked back. I think it's a profession, whether you're a solicitor or a barrister, that requires someone who has an engaging mind, who likes to question, but who's able to articulate themselves in terms of skills. So I think that's what it was really the circumstances I grew up in, and the skill set that I felt I had as a student going through school, university, college, that lent me automatically almost to the legal profession. But now that I'm in law, I've discovered that there are many other professions also that lend itself to those skills.
Well, thank you very much for those answers. Well, it was very good. As you said, Asian people, there's like 3 professions also with Africans, we have the same. But yes, and just to add on, what exactly, when someone is thinking about pursuing a profession in law, what attributes should they have? What exactly should they look to themselves and say, I have this and this and this? What attributes can this person have to be a good lawyer?
I think, and if there is any takeaway from my talk today, it is going to be a one word, and which is perseverance. So it is perseverance, because it is so hard to penetrate in this profession in the UK, especially for people who have Asian or African background. So perseverance and hard work and extreme commitment is absolutely necessary to excel, to penetrate in this profession. So it is the catchword, which is very important for any person to become successful lawyer. And beside this, there are many other qualities which make one very successful barrister or solicitors. I think after like perseverance, it is your integrity, your burning desire to keep on learning always, your independence of thoughts, your knowledge, commercial know-how, and intellectual ability, like critical thinking, as I said earlier, and wit, teamwork, passion to work in teams, and what is most important is compassion as well, because sometimes you find yourself working with vulnerable people in the society, people who are detained unlawfully, people who are seeking international protection, who fled their countries, their streets, left their parents behind, their brothers, sisters, everything to save their life. You're working with them, people suffering from mental health conditions. And also you're working on very sensitive commercial matters, which are very important for your clients. So compassion is also very important. So I think these and many other attributes which makes you one very successful. And Kawsar, what you would like to say?
Yes, and Kawsar, yes.
Yeah, I think you've covered a lot there, and they're really the key attributes. So I completely second your thoughts, Zafar. In terms of other things I would add, I think it might surprise people, but people often think to be a good lawyer, you need to have very good legal skills. I'm going to say something quite controversial and say that's not always the case. You need to, that's almost a prerequisite, but legal skills you develop over time. You know, no one becomes an expert lawyer, but what underpins a good lawyer, in my view, is something more in terms of skill. It's really about what I said earlier. It's about having a very inquiring mind, inquisitive mind, questioning. You will come across as a solicitor or a barrister lots of issues, you know, in cases, and 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10, very few cases actually go on to a final hearing or actually get litigated in courts. The vast majority of litigation that's ever commenced actually settle out. So one of the key attributes here, I would say, is, you know, strategy. You know, are you someone who thinks outside the box? Can you strategize? And those skills are really important because it's the skill set that you bring as a lawyer. Most solicitors now, 50% of solicitors coming into law firms or even more, don't have legal law degrees. They have other degrees, but it's the skills that they bring to the profession. The other thing which I think is bespoke to specific professions, I think, you know, if you're a solicitor, you have to be very keen and engaged with your client, because your lay client, because you're going to be dealing with them day in, day out. And, you know, if you really enjoy that, then the solicitor route is great. The other thing that's more unique to the bar profession, I would say, I've been a solicitor and a barrister, is advocacy. So if you've got a burning hunger and desire to be in court, to do advocacy, then the bar is a profession that specifically looks out for that skill. So I would, again, as I say, I'd second Zafar and his observations and just add those points in terms of skills. I mean, they're not required, but certainly recommended.
Thank you so much for your answers. And to our audience, if you have any questions, please do input them and we'll try and get them answered as we go along. And just, you were talking about hard work, trying to make sure that you're focused, advocacy. So in your journeys to qualifying, to getting your qualifications, are there any obstacles you came across that seemed hard and difficult to cross, but you eventually did? But just, yeah, do you have any obstacles that you know, that happened during your journeys?
Kawsar, you will give the answer first, or?
Yes, fine. I'm happy to start. I mean, for me personally, it was more of a personal thing. You know, I come from a background of no lawyers, no professionals even. So for someone like me, to be in a legal profession, which I say particularly in the UK and perhaps most countries in the world, it is still one of the most traditional professions out there in the world. You know, if you've got a development in terms of, you know, working rights or something that happens in other professions, it usually follows the legal profession 30 or 40 years later. You know, we're still very old school, old fashioned. So the culture is still very much old in terms of, you know, the expectation and the mindset in comparison to other industries. So for someone of my background without that experience, I think it was more of a personal struggle of working out, you know, is this the right profession for me? Because I didn't have someone at home who I could speak to and say, well, what do you think about this or this route? So it was really trying to navigate the legal field, because it is a very, very difficult profession, as Zafar mentioned early. You need perseverance. So if you come from a background which isn't traditional to law, it's really working out whether it's the right profession for you. Number two, there are some situations certainly I found myself in, going from LSE, Oxford, Harvard to Clifford Chance, Allen and Overy, some of the top academic and professional institutions in the world, and now at the bar. I mean, particularly for people of my background, you have a imposter syndrome almost, thinking, oh, should I really be here? You know, am I deserving of, you know, being at these top institutions? But you often find that, you know, you have all the merits and the abilities to be there. So having the confidence is really important, because, you know, as a legal professional, whether you're a solicitor or you're a barrister, your clients demand you to not only have confidence in them, but also confidence in yourself and the ability to take up their case in a reasoned manner. So I think that's been the overarching obstacle that I've faced, and it's really a personal one. And the other second point I would mention is on a more broader level. I think, we're quite privileged, I would say, to have a very diverse panel with us today. But diversity isn't the strong point in the legal profession. Still, women are far outnumbered by men, particularly in the more senior ranks. Black and minority ethnic lawyers, although at the lower end is almost 50-50 now, certainly at the more mid to senior level of both the bar and city law firms, for example, in the solicitor profession, we're very, very small in numbers. So that's an obstacle, because often what a lot of junior lawyers say to me is, look, I have to work doubly as hard as my white competitor or white colleague, because I need to prove myself that much more that I'm right for this environment, because there's no one else like me. So I think those are the two challenges I would highlight.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Zafar.
Okay. So fortunately or unfortunately, my problem started after I qualified as a solicitor in England and Wales. In Pakistan, I did my BLLB. Then I joined the chambers of Sir Umar Ata Bandialno. He's serving as a justice in Supreme Court of Pakistan. He was very famous commercial law barrister in Pakistan. So after doing my LLB, it was very easy for me to become a counsel advocate in Pakistan. Then I came to the UK after 2 years. In 2005, I did my master in law. I passed my QLTT as a foreign lawyer, and I became solicitor. So my problem started in the UK after becoming solicitor, because I was a solicitor without having any experience of practicing law in the UK. I will come to that, but I want to highlight a couple of things, especially for the people who have Asian or African backgrounds. There are many, many professional reports, and I'm very sensitive to them, being a human rights solicitor. I was reading one report a year ago. I think this report was published by UK's Equality and Human Rights Commission. In accordance with that report, for a job, if there are two candidates, one is white candidate and the second is candidate with Asian background, or if he or she is from Asia or from Africa, or if their names are like Muslim soundings name or Asian soundings names or African soundings name, regardless of their qualification and experience, even if they have equal qualification, equal experience as compared to the white candidate, that person is 70% less likely to secure the job. So first of all, it is a big difference. Many people don't talk about such things, but being a human rights solicitor, I will not shy away from discussing these things. So we always think many candidates who have Asian or African backgrounds, already it is 70% less likely for them to secure the job. So already they have 30% of the ground to maneuver within. And secondly, if you are from outside of the UK, from non-speaking English countries, your language skills can be hurdled. You can be very knowledgeable with very sharp mind, analytical skills. But if your oral and written English skills are not very good, then your chances are very low. Already, as I told you, in many, many cases, unless exceptionally you are very lucky and you are from Harvard or Yale, Oxford or Cambridge, and you are first class, then you fall within the exceptions, small group of people. But for great majority of candidates, these things are the real hurdle. And even if you are white, in accordance with the Law Society statistics, there was a news in Law Gazette that 40% of LLB students with LPC, they do not get traineeship in order to become a solicitor. It is 40% people with LLB and LPC. But the percentage becomes very high if you consider LLB students who have not done LPC. So I think the percentage is between 18 to 20% students who have done LLB, they ultimately secure traineeship and become qualified solicitor. And I think for barristers, it is even much less than that. So it is very hard, as I said earlier, to penetrate in this profession. Therefore, perseverance and hard work is very important. Your passion, your commitment, your willingness to work in other areas like in banks, different companies, with government departments, voluntary work, or working with charities as research assistants with barristers, law firms, Queen's councils with a law commission, or you can think to join legal services as government legal department lawyers before becoming solicitors. So if one really wants to practice as a solicitor or barrister, then these are the hurdles, these are the practical hurdles which many people face in England and Wales. And with keeping in mind the ground reality, they should be willing to gain experience in other professions before becoming solicitors or barristers. It is what I would like to say on this.
Thank you so much for the insight, Zafar. It's very nice to hear that we need to persevere and actually gain experience and get legal experience so that we can actually penetrate into the profession. And you did mention that there are solicitors, the conventional professions, solicitors and barristers. But what exactly are the other professions that we can go into within the legal profession? Both of you have worked in law firms, and you even have a law firm, Zafar. So what exactly can we do? Are there other routes into the legal profession, as you said?
I think one can become paralegal to start with, or can work as a research assistant with, as I told you, with QCs, senior counsels, with law commission, in law firms as research assistants, judicial assistants, and again, civil services. If somebody is interested, like, for example, in international arbitration cases, then oil exploration companies, they should try their luck with such companies, not working as a barrister or solicitor in their legal department, just to get the practical feel what is going on there, how they enter into contracts, what are the implications. So to get that experience, if somebody is interested in the commercial field, and if that person is finding difficult to get traineeship or pupillage to become barrister, then that person can think to join a bank, to work in a bank. And there is a long list, like you can work as a licensed conveyancer, a licensed probate practitioner, and there is another great option to work as a chartered legal executive. You will be doing same work as solicitors, but you don't need a law degree, or you don't have to do LPC or formal training contract, which is very difficult. 40% success, 40% people cannot get, as I told you, with LPC, and only the success rate is between 18 to 20% if you consider LLB students without LPC. So if you want to become chartered legal executive, then you can work in many law firms, can do the same work, and afterwards you can qualify as a solicitor. So it is a long route, but it is not as difficult as becoming solicitor from the formal ways. And then last but not least, a very supreme profession you can consider of becoming a law teacher or research assistant with a professor in order to become a law teacher. So there are many other areas in which you can think to work before becoming a solicitor or barrister, I think.
Would you like to add anything else, Kawsar?
Zafar, that's a very extensive list. The only other thing I would add is I'm currently a counsel, independent counsel to the undercover policing inquiry. So it's a public inquiry looking into policing practices, which was set up by Theresa May when she was Home Secretary. That's an inquiry in which I act as a counsel, but we have lots of paralegals who work at the public inquiry, people who are law students or people who aren't but and are at university, and that's a really useful route by which you can get into the legal profession, because as paralegals, although the level of legal work they do isn't the same as what lawyers do, they come into contact with lawyers and others. So taking any opportunity in the legal profession is very important, obviously within reason, but coming into contact with lawyers if you're very junior is very beneficial. So there are lots of paralegal opportunities, and I would emphasize as well that the public sector, a lot of people think private sector. You know, I went into the private sector at Clifford Chance when I started off, but it's not until now, more recently, because I get instructed by government departments a lot, that it's opened my eyes to the enormous opportunities within the public sector of legal jobs. So all local authorities, for example, have legal teams across the country locally. So there's opportunities through those local authorities. So think outside the box, think unconventional in terms of getting opportunities, because they're very hard to come by. The other thing I would mention is, lots of people want to become a barrister. It's very difficult and competitive to get a pupillage. I started off as a solicitor and managed to cross-qualify. So there is that opportunity, because if you don't make it in one route, you've got another route which you can go down and then, cross-qualify potentially.
Thank you so much for that. And going into you cross-qualified into the barrister, and you've been a solicitor, what exactly is the difference between the two, so that our audience knows exactly what we are talking about?
Yeah, Nadine, if I banked £1 for every time I've been asked that question, I'd probably be a millionaire by now. It's a very good question, and I think a lot of people assume they know, but there, unless you've lived that, there's lots of nuances which you won't be familiar with. One of the things I would say is, and it's something that struck me a lot, is as a solicitor, you're self-employed. I mean, as a barrister, you're self-employed. As a solicitor, 9 times out of 10, you'll work within a law firm, so you'll be employed. Although the rules around that has changed a bit, so I think some senior solicitors can go into independent practice. But by and large, if you're a solicitor, you're employed in a law firm. As a barrister, you're self-employed individual working and operating from a set of chambers usually. Or there's other routes where, as a barrister, you can be an employed barrister within government legal department or other public authorities, etc. So you can be an employed barrister as well. But by and large, most barristers are self-employed. The other difference I would say is in respect of the work generally. I think as a solicitor, certainly when I was a solicitor, I was speaking to lay clients day in, day out. I'd be on the phone to very senior executives at HSBC, when at A&O we were dealing with their exit relocation plans, etc. You would speak at the coalface with the client. You understand their business, you strategize. The role isn't simply just to be a legal advisor, but you almost become a business advisor. I'm talking more in the corporate world and commercial world. As a barrister, it's quite different, because vast majority of times you get instructed at a very late stage and when litigation commences. So that's a very big difference between the professions. So the other difference is, as a solicitor, the work that you do, a lot of the work is, speaking with your client, getting the case together, preparing the case, trying to make sense of it. Because when a non-legal lawyer comes in, they don't know what their case is, what their claims are. Whereas when you're a barrister, when I get instructed, the solicitor has done an excellent job 9 times out of 10, and done all the hard work, I say, where they've looked at the case, they've advised the client, they've produced the claims, the documents, they filed the court, and then I get involved at the late stage when there's a case at the High Court or in a tribunal stage, where I take that, I read into it, and then I prepare for the case in terms of the advocacy in court, etc. So they're almost at two different stages. I think solicitor stage is at the earlier stage, the barrister at the end if it goes to litigation. But there's overlap between both, because as counsel, I get instructed sometimes to give advice on different issues. What are some of the other differences? As a solicitor, vast majority of times, if you're working in a law firm, you have billable hours, right? So, the clock is always ticking, right? That's the way law firms make their money. That's the business model. That's how you bill clients. And it's a point that isn't mentioned enough, I find, in these sorts of questions, but it's a big point because there's a pressure that comes with it. You have to bill a certain number of hours to make a law firm profitable, and you to be a profitable fee earner within a firm. As a barrister, I don't get that same sort of pressure. When clerks in chambers, take on a case on my behalf, when an inquiry comes in, they usually agree a brief fee and refreshers for per day that I'm in court. That isn't always based on an hourly rate, or I have to do a certain number of hours to survive, etc. So those sorts of things are quite important. They seem like small issues, but issues about self-employed, non-employed make a difference based on what sort of person you are. The other big difference I'd mentioned between solicitor and barrister is, and I certainly feel it, is as a solicitor you have a huge support mechanism. When I was one of the big arbitrations I worked at, which was representing a Russian oligarch, there was 4 of us: a partner, senior partner, a mid-ranking associate, and then me. I was a trainee at the time on this matter. There was always layers above me where I can go and seek advice and support and say, look, X, what do you think, usually the partner, about this? Are we on the right track? As a barrister, it's not always the case, because you're self-employed, you're independent, people come to you for your expertise, so there isn't the same support mechanism or the network. For example, at Allen & Overy or Clifford Chance, if I really needed advice on a legal point, I could just ask one of our PSL experts and say, can you do me some research? I need to draft a very quick advice on this, and they'll produce it. Whereas I can't do that. I have to do the research. I don't have the infrastructure that as a barrister that you would typically have as a solicitor, but that has its perk where you're more independent, you're free flowing. And one of the great strengths of the bar, I find, and one of the things that attracted me to the bar, is that aspect of being self-employed. Look, today, for example, this week, I'm in the middle of an employment tribunal. Last week, I was, in an education tribunal. The variety of work is huge, and I get to decide when I prepare for those cases, so long as I'm prepared in time, of course, for the hearing. So there's flexibility. So I think those are the points I would mention.
Thank you so much, Kawsar. That was very good for people who it's a normal question that we get usually for university students who are just starting out and they want to know which route to take. And Zafar,
as I say, yes. I need to bank £1 for every time that's
for
been
every time. It's one of the main questions at the beginning of anyone's law career. And Zafar, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yes, Kawsar has covered this very comprehensively. I have very little to add, but just a couple of points. Barristers, in many cases, have a high right of audience, like they can represent clients in High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, whereas solicitors, they have right of audience in all tribunals and informal courts, like, for example, if it is the civil courts, then up to the county court, unless you are a third kind of a lawyer called solicitor advocate. If you're solicitor and if you pass a test, high right of audience test, then you can become a solicitor advocate. Solicitor advocate has all rights of a fully qualified barrister and fully qualified solicitor. So if you want to work as a barrister and as a solicitor, then you can think to become not as a solicitor or barrister, but solicitor advocate. And secondly, in many cases, barristers do not have access to public. They cannot take cases directly from the public. Member of public cannot go to barristers in many cases, in run-of-the-mill cases, unless it is like international work or international arbitration or human rights work, when some of the solicitors have direct access rights. So I'm not talking about exceptions. In generally, barristers do not have direct access to the public. It is only It is only the solicitors who can take cases directly from the public, and then solicitors instruct barristers to do specialist work on the cases. I think it will be very useful if I give you a practical example of a case. I'm a solicitor. For example, I would meet a client. I would take detailed instruction from the client. I will give the client advice on the merits of the case. What is the likely prospects of success? Then I would come back. I would open up a case on case management system. We'll do different bits and pieces. Then I will start looking at the facts case. I will analyze them, marshal them. If there are any gaps in the evidence or the facts, I will take further instruction from the client. Maybe you will have to take instruction for a couple of times, or in complex cases, many times from the client. And then I would do my legal research. After completing my legal research, I will draft a pre-action protocol letter. It is called pre-action because you have, in many cases, you have to send a letter to the, if you are claimant, to the other side to warn them, look, my client is going to the court, grant the relief or come to settlement, otherwise we will go to the court. It is called pre-action protocol letter when you set up the facts, the relevant law, legal arguments and everything. If the case is not settled, then you compile bundles, and then you, at that stage, in many cases, unless case is very complex and your client can pay the fee for a solicitor and barrister, you can instruct barrister at any stage. But typically in normal cases, when you go to the court, then you instruct a barrister to draft grounds, the grounds for your claim or for your case or for your application. And you file case in the court. And when it comes to the hearing, then barrister represent, make speech in the court before the judge, and after which judgment is delivered. So much work is done by solicitors in law firms, and barristers are engaged to draft grounds, skeleton arguments, or make speeches in the court. So it is a rough sketch of a typical case.
Thank you so much, Zafar. Both of you have given given us extensive information about being a solicitor and a barrister. So we've talked about both of these professions and how to get into them. And now firms and companies are giving different routes. They're giving apprenticeships. They're giving routes to be a paralegal just so that you can qualify to be a solicitor and barrister. Do you find that having an LLB is much more of an advantage now when trying to qualify to be a solicitor or barrister, or are these other routes also viable? What do you think? What's your opinion on this?
Yes, I think I hesitate a bit because I'm certainly no expert about qualification routes, etc. So anything I say on this issue should be taken with lots of salt, more than a pinch of salt. I'd say I don't know is the honest answer. I think any route where you can qualify and it's what's recommended by the Law Society or the Bar Council and within the regulatory framework should be fine, because otherwise there wouldn't be that option available and open to you. I know I've come across lots of chartered legal executives, if that's the official title. I think the more routes which are open to qualification, the better. So, I have no specific advice, if I'm honest, either way. I think, take qualified advice on this topic.
What about you, Zafar? Do you think that any route is better than the other, or are all routes practically the same?
First of all, as Kawsar said, on Law Society's website, Law Society of England and Wales, there is comprehensive advice and information for the applicants. And then you can decide which route suits you. But the fundamental question, whether the LLB is the best degree, or through LLB, whether it is the best route to become solicitor or barrister. Although I have done LLB, and Kawsar has already, he also did LLB, but personally, I don't think it is the only best route, because there are many successful, hugely successful barristers, Queen's counsels, solicitors, especially in international law firms, maybe about 40 to 50% their staff, they are solicitors, but they have done non-law degree, like degree in economics, history, math. So, and after that, you can do GDL, then LPC, 2-year traineeship contracts, you can become a solicitor. I'm talking about the normal route. And there are many areas of law. I was working in a commercial law firm in Worcester near Birmingham. And I had a very good colleague. She has done PhD in chemistry from University of Oxford. And she was working as a solicitor in intellectual property department in that law firm. If you are working, for example, in intellectual property department, unless you have very strong background in scientific studies, you cannot become successful solicitor. And then I give you a living example of Lord Sumption. He recently retired from Supreme Court. He was very famous judge of Supreme Court. And I think he's the only person in British history who became a Supreme Court judge directly from being a QC. Like, he didn't go to the High Court or the Court of Appeal and then Supreme Court. So he was a successful barrister, then Queen's Counsel barrister, and then he was selected as a judge of Supreme Court. He did a BA in history from University of Oxford, and I was listening to his interview. He said that he thought people who have deep understanding and techniques with history can become very successful solicitor or barristers, because in practical life, it is very rare that you win your case on the basis of pure legal arguments. It is about facts. And when you do LLB, mostly we learn about law, legal arguments, legal reasoning, and everything. Very little time you spend on facts, marshalling it, how to analyze it, because time is very limited. Whereas, for example, if you are reading history, you get the techniques how to collect facts, how to categorize them, how to analyze them, how to marshal them, how to criticize facts. So, and it is something which is very, very important if you want to become very successful barrister or solicitor. So LLB is not the only option. If you have interest in history, math, other areas, just do it. And then you can become a solicitor barrister and you can become very successful.
Thank you, Zafar, for giving everyone a bit of hope to become a solicitor barrister. It gives other people who are doing non-law degrees as well to also take, because we have the LPC and the GDL in different routes and apprenticeships, so you can tackle the legal profession from any time in your life, which is good. Yes. And as we talk about the LPC and the GDL, recently we've heard that they're introducing the SQE, the Solicitor's Qualifying Exam. Yes. And I wanted to get your take on this. How do you feel about them replacing the LPC and putting in the SQE? What exactly are your thoughts on this?
Okay, we have to compare the traditional route, LLB, LPC, then 2-year traineeship, or non-law bachelor degree, then GDL, then 1-year LPC, then 2 years training contract, and then you can become a solicitor. And we have to compare this with this newly introduced route, a solicitor qualifying examination, which Law Society and Solicitor Regulation Authority is going to implement from autumn this year. The former route is first of all, very tiring, very long, and very expensive. So you have to do LLB, or if you are not LLB, then you have to do a graduate diploma in law, which is very expensive. And then you have to spend 16,000 pounds on another university course, legal practice course. And then you enter into a very tough war to grab a training contract. Again, success rate 18 to 20%. So it is very tiring, very expensive. And by the time you do your LPC, you have more than 60,000 pound government loan. I'm talking about most of the students. But now this route, first of all, there is no need for a LLB formal bachelor degree. Yes, it depends upon your will. If you want to do LLB, BA, BSc, it's okay. But you can have a bachelor degree or any qualification which is equivalent to a bachelor degree. And what is equivalent? It is advice has been given on Solicitor Regulation Authority and Law Society's website. And secondly, you don't have to enter into a very tough war to get a formal traineeship contract. Yes, you need to have 2-year work experience, and it is not necessary to work in law firm. For example, in order to get that 2-year work experience, you can work in a law firm, you can work in a, for example, bank in their legal department, you can work in a company with their, if they have their legal department, you can work there, you can work with charities doing legal human rights work. So there are many avenues, and you where you can work and you can count your experience towards 2-year qualifying work experience. And for SQE, solicitor qualification examination, you have to pass 2 tests. One, ideally, after you do your degree, if you're studying LLB, it tests your knowledge of law. And then second test, which you should take after you complete your 2-year work experience, it tests your practical knowledge. So they have taken out the expensive element and the tiring element out of it. Still, it is going to be competitive. It is not the case that it is going to be very easy, but it is less competitive, less expensive, less tiring as compared to the formal roles.
Thank you so much, Zafar. Kawsar, do you have anything to add to that?
Very comprehensive answer there in terms of the 2 differences, and completely second it. I think one of the real positives and the strengths of the new system is it opens up the profession. Essentially, it means, you know, people from non-traditional backgrounds who might not have the money to come to London from somewhere out of London to do some, you know, work experience or a VAC scheme, etc., or even a training contract, can do other forms of experience which comes up to scratch with some kind of legal experience that benefits them. So it doesn't need to necessarily be a formal training contract. So it will open up the profession, and I think a lot more people will qualify. There is one thing that I do hesitate a bit about, if I may, and that's about the 2-year training contract regime, because I'm a solicitor as well, but not practicing, so I do have a vested interest in this. I do one thing that does worry me a bit, if I've looked into this, but it does seem like there needs to be a bit more. There needs to be. I worry about the extent to which the profession can regulate what that 2-year experience comprises of, because I've certainly seen some paralegals in some jobs where they don't do any legal work, but in other paralegal jobs in other firms they do lots of legal work. So I think that's one of the big challenges that regulator will have in future, because it's opened up the profession and the types of experiences that can qualify towards an LPC and the 2-year training requirement, what that comprises of. And given the huge numbers that apply, that might be quite difficult in terms of how it manages. But let's see. I think overall it's a positive development. It will open up the profession, and particularly it will encourage people from diverse backgrounds who don't have bank of mum and dad and £60,000, as Zafar mentioned, to qualify. So it's good overall.
Thank you so much for talking about the SQE and trying to actually gain experience and trying to come from a background where you don't have money. So it's actually good for the legal profession in the UK. And as you talk about legal experience, what advice do you have for someone who wants to get legal experience while they're in university or before they even go to university? Do you have anything that you'd like to say to someone who's looking for legal experience? What advice would you give them?
I think one should actively looking for work experience placements when you're doing, for example, your LLB after first year or second year. Hello, Nadine.
Yes, sorry about that. And Kawsar, yes, continue, sorry.
Yes, so work experience placements, one should proactively seek work experience placements and make application in a sensitive way. Your CV should be very good, professional, and you can get the tips for professional people from experts about your CV, and one should apply for work experience placements. And then, as it has been a current central theme of my talk, that it is. I'm not discouraging anybody, believe me, but it is the reality, because it is very competitive. It is difficult to penetrate in this profession. Then one should try to get as much experience as possible by working voluntarily, the voluntary with law firms or with law clinics. Uh, and and one should also think to do short courses online to brush up your knowledge, or to gain more specialized knowledge. For example, Hague Academy of International Law, they run, if somebody is interested in international law, international arbitration, then it is not very expensive. Uh, there are summer courses in international, public international law, private international law, and winter courses. And then there are many other sources where you can get online education, and it is not very expensive in different areas of law. And again, networking is very important. You should try to find suitable people who work in those areas which interest you. You should approach them. You should request them to give you the opportunity to work with them as their research assistant. LinkedIn, there are many people. I find myself very helpful. They give you advice. So it is all the different sorts of things which one should try, I think.
And Kawsar, what do you think?
Yeah, again, second all of those points. I think just being creative. I think the usual means are, if you want to go into solicitor route, back schemes, work experience, if you want to go into the bar, mini pupilages in chambers. Interesting point Zafar mentioned, but there's lots of other avenues to get that information. So doing online courses, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the behest of an opportunity at a firm, but that's recommended. The other big point I would mention is, and particularly for UK students, of course, is our courts are open in this country. So you can go into the High Court, you can go into the Supreme Court, you can go into a Crown Court, Magistrates Court, County Court, you can sit down and watch proceedings because they're all public. And actually, although you might not have the papers to hand, there's a lot you can learn from that experience alone. Watching advocates do advocacy in a criminal trial or in the Court of Appeal, you know, it's. I often find when I ask students, because I used to do that, I was a very sad student who did that, because I was at the LSE and the RCJ was around the corner, so I'd go and just watch cases, which is a bit unusual for a student, though. But you know, I would strongly encourage it, because you will get a sense of cases, how legal points are raised, how judges ask questions, and you know, that's a very informative way. You don't need to apply for anything. You don't need to apply to a law firm. You know, it's free. So if you could take advantage of that, you can get quite an easy sense whether you'll enjoy being a lawyer or not, whether you want to go down the solicitor route or the barrister route, and it costs nothing. I've always found it very surprising the number of students I asked, even at law school, you know, have you ever been in a court? And they say no, because it's a bit odd if you want to go into a profession that you've never been in a court. It's, you know, it's one of the things that people should really try and do. And as I say, I find it shocking how few people do it.
Thank you so much. I think we're running out of time, but just to round everything up, what last advice do you have for our future lawyers or people who already gained a training contract? What do you want to say to them? What advice could you give them?
Again, I would say perseverance, hard work, and hope.
I'd second that. I'd say, you know, it's a very competitive profession. You need to enter into it with your eyes wide open. But at the same time, there are lots of examples of people who haven't got the traditional grades or the backgrounds and have made it very far. And if you enjoy it and you do well at it, the rewards are, immense, both personally, financially. It's a great profession to be in. So, if your head's in the right place, your heart's in the right place, do come into law. But I want to qualify it as well by saying that, there's a bigger world outside law. There's lots of different professions, so it's not the be all end all.
Yep.
Thank you so much. It has been an informative discussion. Thank you so much for attending. And do you have any questions, Zubair?
I want to thank Nadine, Zafar, and Kawsar for your excellent talk. I think it was very, very informative, and we look forward to welcoming you again in our sessions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.